Grace Mitchell's fingers were the only thing between a 4-year-old boy and a 40-foot drop to certain death. She saved his life in 3 seconds flat and got fired 5 minutes later. But what the billionaire father did next didn't just change her life. It exposed a conspiracy that would land someone in federal prison and transform hundreds of families forever. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button because this story is about to take a turn that will leave you speechless. Now, let's get back to Grace's story. "It's okay," she whispered over and over. "You're okay. I've got you." Grace had worked as Oliver's nanny at the Whitmore estate for 3 years. 3 years of early mornings and bedtime stories. 3 years of scraped knees and first words. 3 years in this mansion of marble floors and crystal chandeliers that felt more like a museum than a home. She'd never come this close to losing him. The sound of expensive shoes on hardwood echoed from inside, quick, sharp clicks growing louder. Grace looked up just as Victoria Whitmore appeared in the doorway. Oliver's mother stood frozen, her perfectly styled blonde hair catching the afternoon light. Her designer dress didn't have a single wrinkle. For one heartbeat, Grace thought she saw relief flash across Victoria's face. Then it was gone. What happened here? Victoria's voice cut through the air like a blade, cold, controlled, and sharp with accusation. Grace blinked, still holding Oliver. He climbed up on the railing. I caught him just as—" "You caught him?" Victoria's eyes narrowed. "Or did you let this happen in the first place?" The words hit Grace like a slap. She stared at Victoria, unable to process what she was hearing. Oliver was still crying in her arms. Her fingers were scraped raw. Her whole body shook from adrenaline. "Mrs. Whitmore, I would never—" "Where were you when he climbed up?" Victoria took a step forward. "How does a 4-year-old nearly fall to his death on your watch?" Grace opened her mouth, but no words came out. The truth, that she'd been right there, that she'd turned away for just 10 seconds, seemed to dissolve under Victoria's glacial stare. Grace had no idea that saving this child's life would cost her everything, or that what came next would defy belief. But first, she had to survive the next 5 minutes. Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking against the balcony tiles like a countdown. Grace's arms tightened instinctively around Oliver. "Mrs. Whitmore, please. I was watching him. He wanted to see the birds in the garden, and I turned for just a moment to get his jacket. When I looked back, he was already climbing." "A moment?" Victoria's voice rose, cracking through her icy composure. "A moment is all it takes for a child to die, Grace. Do you understand that? My son nearly died because of your negligence." "Mom, no!" Oliver pulled away from Grace, his tear-stained face turning toward Victoria. "Mom, Grace saved me. The railing, it broke. I didn't mean to climb up, but it broke, and she caught me." Victoria's jaw tightened. She didn't even look at her son. Her eyes stayed locked on Grace, cold, calculating, and final. "You're fired." The words dropped like stones. "Security will escort you out immediately. You have 15 minutes to collect your personal belongings from your quarters." Grace's breath caught in her throat. "What? Mrs. Whitmore, you can't—" "I can, and I am." Victoria turned away, already pulling out her phone. "James will ensure you leave the premises without incident. Consider yourself lucky I'm not calling the police." The world tilted. Grace tried to stand, her legs unsteady beneath her. Oliver reached for her, but Victoria swept him up in one smooth motion, carrying him inside before he could protest further. 12 minutes later, Grace walked through the marble foyer flanked by 2 security guards. James, the head of security who'd shared coffee with her countless mornings, wouldn't meet her eyes. The other household staff lined the hallway, some staring, others quickly looking away. 3 years of her life packed into a single plastic grocery bag. A spare sweater. Her phone charger. The drawing Oliver had made her last week that read, "Best Nanny Ever," in crooked letters. Her arms still throbbed where she'd gripped Oliver's wrists. Purple bruises were already forming. Her hands trembled, not from fear now, but from the adrenaline crash hitting her system like a freight train. The massive front doors closed behind her with a heavy thud that echoed in her chest. Grace stood on the cold Manhattan sidewalk, the evening air biting through her thin cardigan. The Whitmore estate loomed behind her, 5 stories of limestone and privilege that had been her workplace, her second home, her steady income for 3 years. Gone. All of it. Gone in 5 minutes. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out with shaking hands. Jasmine. "Hey, Mom, how was your day? Don't forget we need to pay the electric bill by Friday. Love you." Grace's vision blurred. Jasmine. Her beautiful, bright 15-year-old daughter who trusted her to keep them afloat. 8 years. 8 years since David died and left them drowning in medical debt. 8 years of clawing their way toward stability, one nanny job at a time. And now this. Grace pressed her palm against her mouth, holding back a sob. How do you tell your daughter you've lost everything? Again? The purr of an engine made her look up. A black Mercedes pulled smoothly to the curb in front of her, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights. The passenger window rolled down. As Grace stood on the cold Manhattan sidewalk with nothing but a plastic bag of belongings, her phone buzzed. The text from Jasmine asking about her day made Grace's heart shatter. How do you tell your daughter you've lost everything? Again? But a black Mercedes was about to pull up that would change everything. Grace stared at the tinted window as it descended, her heart hammering. She expected security, maybe police. Instead, she found herself looking into the steel-gray eyes of Jonathan Whitmore, Oliver's father, Victoria's husband, the man who built a tech empire before he turned 35 and now ran it from behind the scenes. "Get in." His voice was quiet, but commanding, not a request. Grace's grip tightened on her plastic bag. "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." The word seemed to cost him something. 5 minutes. Against every instinct screaming at her to walk away, Grace opened the door and slid into the leather interior. The door closed with a soft click, sealing them in silence broken only by the purr of the engine. Jonathan didn't look at her. His jaw worked like he was chewing on words too sharp to swallow. Finally, he turned. "Oliver told me what happened." His voice cracked slightly. The truth. All of it. How he wanted to see the nest in the elm tree. How he climbed up before you could stop him. How the railing gave way and you... He stopped, pressing his fingers against his eyes. "My God, you saved my son's life." The realization seemed to hit him in waves. Grace watched this powerful man, this billionaire who commanded boardrooms and built empires, crumble under the weight of how close he'd come to losing everything that mattered. "The railing was rotting," Grace said quietly. "I filed 3 maintenance requests about it over the past 6 months. Jonathan's face went pale, then red. His hand curled into a fist against his thigh. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather checkbook. The pen scratched across the paper, smooth, practiced strokes. He tore it free and held it out to her. Grace looked down at the check. $1 million. Her breath stopped. 1 million. Enough to pay off every debt. Enough to send Jasmine to any college she wanted. Enough to never worry about electric bills again. She pushed it back toward him. "This is hush money." The words tasted bitter. "You're paying me to disappear quietly so your wife doesn't look bad for firing the woman who saved your son." Jonathan's eyes widened slightly. "No, I don't want your money, Mr. Whitmore." Grace's voice shook but held firm. "I want my dignity back. I want the truth to matter more than your wife's pride. I want..." She stopped, pressing her lips together. "I want to live in a world where doing the right thing doesn't destroy you." The silence stretched between them like a wire pulled taut. Jonathan slowly folded the check and put it back in his pocket. When he looked at her again, something had shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. "You're right." He pulled out a business card, wrote something on the back, and handed it to her. "I'm leaving for Singapore tomorrow. 2 weeks. But when I get back, I'm going to make this right. Real changes, Grace. Not just money. Truth." Grace stared at the card. His private number, handwritten on the back. "Why should I believe you?" "Because you just turned down $1 million. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "That tells me everything I need to know about who you are." Grace took the business card with Jonathan's private number, not knowing that in 2 weeks, her entire world would transform. But first, she'd have to survive 14 days of rejection, desperation, and a job market that didn't want a nanny with a suspicious gap in her resume. Could she hold on long enough to find out what unbelievable thing the billionaire father had planned? Grace stepped out of the Mercedes and watched it disappear into Manhattan traffic. The business card felt like both a lifeline and a cruel joke burning in her palm. 2 weeks. She had to survive 2 weeks. Day 1, she hit the pavement running. Resume printed at the library. Hair pulled back. Her best interview suit pressed and ready. Grace Mitchell was a professional with 8 years of childcare experience, stellar references, and, "I'm sorry, but there's a gap in your employment history?" The agency director looked up from Grace's application, her smile tight and practiced. "You left the Whitmore position very suddenly?" Grace's throat tightened. "I can explain. And we can't contact Mrs. Whitmore for a reference because there's a non-disclosure agreement." The words felt like admitting guilt. "I see." The director's tone said everything. The interview was over. By day 3, Grace had heard "we'll be in touch" 7 times. Nobody called back. By day 5, the rent notice appeared on her door. 7 days remaining. "Mom?" Jasmine found her at the kitchen table that night, surrounded by rejected applications. "Mom, I can defer college for a semester. Pick up more shifts at the cafe. It's not a big deal." "No." Grace's voice came out sharper than she intended. She softened it. "Baby, no. You're not sacrificing your education because of this. I'll figure it out." Jasmine's eyes, so much like her father's, filled with worry that no 15-year-old should carry. "Dad would want me to help." Grace pulled her daughter close. "Your dad would want you to finish school and become the doctor you've dreamed about since you were 7. That's how you help. By living the life we're fighting for." But alone in her room that night, Grace stared at the prescription bottles on her nightstand. Blood pressure medication, anxiety medication. Both needed refills she couldn't afford. Week 1 ended with hope bruised but breathing. Week 2 arrived like a storm. Grace stopped looking for nanny positions. She applied to retail stores, warehouses, call centers. Anywhere that might hire her before rent came due. She stood in line at a grocery store, applying for cashier positions on a phone with 15% battery. She wore her interview suit until the knees went shiny. She kept her hair neat, even when she wanted to scream. She smiled at managers who looked through her like she was invisible. Day 13 arrived cold and gray. Grace sat at her kitchen table. Bills spread before her like a losing hand of cards. Rent, electric, phone, Jasmine's tuition payment, her medications. She could pay 3 out of 5. Maybe. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Ms. Mitchell? This is David Chen, assistant to Jonathan Whitmore. Mr. Whitmore would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at Whitmore Technologies headquarters. Does that work for your schedule?" Grace's hand trembled so badly she almost dropped the phone. Yes, that works perfectly." "Excellent. I'll have your name at security. 17th floor." That night, Grace pulled her suit from the closet one more time. The fabric was tired, but still dignified. She pressed it carefully, rehearsing words she might say. "Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate you following up. I'm ready to discuss." What? What was she ready for? Another false start? Another disappointment? But something in David Chen's voice had sounded different, formal, important. As Grace stood before the glass tower of Whitmore Technologies the next morning, she had no idea that the unbelievable was about to begin. What Jonathan Whitmore had planned wasn't just a job offer. It was a revolution that would change hundreds of lives. But first, Grace had to walk through those doors and face the man who held her future in his hands. The elevator climbed 17 floors in silence. Grace watched the numbers tick upward, each one taking her higher into a world she'd only ever glimpsed from the outside. The doors opened onto the executive floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan like a painting. The marble beneath her feet probably cost more than her yearly rent, but Grace didn't shrink. 14 days of rejection had burned away something soft in her. What remained was steel. David Chen led her past assistants and conference rooms to a corner office. He knocked twice, then opened the door. Jonathan Whitmore stood by the window, backlit by morning sun. He turned, and Grace caught her breath. He looked different. Older somehow, but also more alive, like a man who'd been sleeping and finally woke up. "Grace." He crossed the room, hand extended. "Thank you for coming." His handshake was firm and warm. No power play, just respect. "Please, sit." He gestured to the sitting area, leather couches, not the desk. Equals, not employer and employee. Grace sat, her worn suit suddenly feeling less like a weakness and more like armor. "I couldn't stop thinking about it," Jonathan said quietly. He didn't need to explain what it was. "The whole flight to Singapore, every meeting, every night in the hotel. I kept seeing Oliver's face, his body hanging in the air. Your hands, the only thing between my son and—" His voice broke. He cleared his throat. "You saved him without hesitation, even though we'd treated you like furniture for 3 years. Even though my wife had been cold to you from day one, you still threw yourself forward and held on." He pulled a folder from the coffee table and slid it across to Grace. She opened it. Architectural renderings, business plans, legal documents with words like charitable trust and endowment. "I don't understand," Grace said slowly. "I'm setting up a foundation." Jonathan leaned forward, his gray eyes intense. "The Mitchell Foundation. And I want you to run it." The words didn't make sense. Grace read them again in her head, rearranging them, trying to find the version where they meant something else. "You want me to run a foundation?" Executive Director. Full authority over operations, grant decisions, hiring. The mission. He tapped the folder. Supporting families dealing with medical debt and job displacement. People who fall through the cracks because one bad day destroyed everything they built. Grace's heart stopped. He was describing her life, David's cancer, the medical bills, the years of barely surviving. "I'm seeding it with $500 million, Jonathan continued. "Your salary would be $250,000 annually, full benefits, a seat on the board." The numbers were so large they felt fake. Grace stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "Why?" The word came out as a whisper. "Because you showed me what real character looks like." Jonathan's voice was steady and sure. "You saved my son without hesitation despite how we treated you. You turned down $1 million because you wanted truth more than money. Grace, you're exactly who should be in charge of helping people who deserve better than what life has given them." Tears blurred Grace's vision. She thought of Jasmine's worried face, of the prescription bottles she couldn't refill, of every family sitting at kitchen tables, choosing between rent and electricity, between food and medicine. Her voice cracked. "Yes, I'll do it." Jonathan smiled, really smiled, for the first time since she'd met him. He stood and extended his hand again. Welcome to the Mitchell Foundation, Ms. Mitchell. Grace Mitchell walked out of that building as the executive director of a $500 million foundation. But the truly unbelievable part wasn't the money or the title. It was what this opportunity would allow her to become. In 3 months, she'd face her first real test, and in 6 months, a scandal would threaten to destroy everything unless Grace found the courage to fight back. Grace's first day at the Mitchell Foundation started with sunrise streaming through windows that didn't look down on anyone. The office space Jonathan had chosen wasn't in a glass tower. It was a renovated brownstone in Brooklyn, with warm wood floors and furniture that invited people to sit, not intimidate them into leaving. "We're here to help," Grace told her small staff that first morning. "That means the space needs to feel like help, not judgment." 3 weeks later, the Rodriguez family sat across from her desk. Maria Rodriguez twisted a tissue in her hands while her husband Carlos stared at the floor. Their daughter Sofia, 7 years old, leukemia survivor, played quietly in the corner. "The treatment saved her life," Maria whispered. "But the bills—" $280,000, Carlos finished. His voice was hollow. "We've sold everything. The house, my truck. We're living with my sister now, all 5 of us in her 2-bedroom apartment. But it's still not enough." Grace saw herself in Maria's desperate eyes, saw David in the hospital bed, saw the bills that had buried her for years. "I've been exactly where you are," Grace said softly. "My husband died of cancer 8 years ago. The medical debt nearly destroyed us. But you're going to be okay. We're going to help." Maria's sob of relief echoed through Grace's heart like a bell. By month 3, the foundation had helped 43 families, 43 kitchen tables where parents could breathe again, 43 children who wouldn't watch their parents drown. Grace's phone buzzed during lunch. A text from Jasmine. "Mom, got an A on my anatomy midterm. Professor says I'm top of the class. Love you so much." Grace pressed the phone to her chest, blinking back tears. Her daughter was thriving. Finally thriving. "Ms. Mitchell?" David Chen appeared at her door. "Board meeting in 10 minutes. Grace straightened her blazer, new, well-fitted, confident, and headed upstairs. The boardroom was full of Manhattan's elite, donors with summer homes and trust funds. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, Oliver's drawing of Grace taped to his leather portfolio. "We're requesting a 50% budget increase for next quarter," Grace presented, her voice steady. "Current demand exceeds our capacity by 300%. Richard Pearson, old money, older attitudes, frowned. "That seems excessive." Grace met his eyes. "You know what's excessive, Mr. Pearson? Families facing medical bankruptcy in the wealthiest nation on earth. Children sleeping in cars because one parent's cancer destroyed a lifetime of work. That's excessive. Our response is barely adequate." The silence was thick. Then Jonathan's pen clicked. "Motion to approve the increase. All in favor?" The vote was unanimous. Grace's life had transformed into something she barely recognized. Foundation work filled her days. But evenings had become something else entirely. "Grace, did you see my goal?" Oliver bounded across the soccer field, grass-stained and glowing. "I saw it." Grace caught him in a hug. "Top corner. The goalie didn't have a chance." Jonathan appeared beside them, 2 bottles of water in hand. "Pizza after this? Jasmine said she'd meet us." "Sounds perfect," Grace said. These moments had become routine. Soccer games, homework help, family dinners where Oliver insisted Grace sit next to him, and Jasmine told stories about her nursing classes. Victoria attended sometimes, her presence like ice in warm water. She was polite now. Carefully, deliberately polite. Still married to Jonathan, but sleeping in separate wings of the mansion. Still Oliver's mother, but no longer the center of his world. Grace tried not to feel victorious about that. Mostly succeeded. She thought she'd found her happy ending. a purpose, a family, a life that mattered. But the next morning, her assistant rushed into her office, face pale, phone trembling in her hand. "Grace, someone leaked the story to the press. About Oliver. About you getting fired. About everything." Grace's blood ran cold. "The media," her assistant whispered. "They're outside. They're everywhere." Grace thought she'd found her happy ending, a purpose, a family, a life that mattered. But the next morning, her assistant would rush in with news that would make her blood run cold. Someone had leaked the story, and the media was about to tear her life apart all over again. Grace stared at her phone screen, the headline burning into her retinas. Whitmore Estate Safety Scandal. Anonymous source reveals cover-up. The article was everywhere. Every news site, every social media platform. Her face, a photo from the foundation's website, plastered beside images of the Whitmore mansion. The story painted two versions of Grace Mitchell. Half the internet saw a hero wronged by billionaire cruelty. The other half saw something uglier, an opportunistic woman who'd leveraged a child's near death into a cushy foundation job. And underneath it all, in comment sections Grace forced herself to stop reading, were the whispers that made her stomach turn. Convenient that a poor black nanny ends up running a Billionaire'S charity. There's more to this story. Women like that always have an angle. She probably planned the whole thing. Grace set the phone down before she threw it. Outside her office window, news vans lined the street. Cameras pointed at the brownstone like weapons. Her assistant had stopped answering the phones after the 100th call. Her private line rang. "Jonathan." "Grace, I'm so sorry." His voice was tight with fury. "We're trying to find the leak. My lawyers are—" "It doesn't matter who leaked it," Grace said quietly. "It's out now. This is going to get ugly. The media will twist everything. They'll dig into your past, your finances, your—" "I know." Grace had lived through public scrutiny before. David's death had brought reporters to her door, asking invasive questions about his treatment, their bills, whether she blamed the hospital. "I've doubled security at Oliver's school," Jonathan continued. "No one gets near him, and I'm releasing a statement this afternoon setting the record straight." "About what? That you hired me because I saved your son?" "That'll just fuel the rumors that we're—" Grace stopped. She couldn't even say it. "I don't care what they think about me," Jonathan said, "but I won't let them destroy you." Grace closed her eyes. "Let me call you back." An hour later, her assistant knocked softly. "There's a Rachel Chen here to see you. Says she's from the New York Times. Won't leave until you talk to her." Grace almost said no. Then something in her gut said wait. Rachel Chen was younger than Grace expected. Sharp eyes. Recorder already on the table before Grace even sat down at the small coffee shop 2 blocks away. "I'm not here about the scandal," Rachel said immediately. "Or I am, but not the one everyone thinks they're covering." Grace's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I've been investigating Victoria Whitmore's finances for 6 months." Rachel pulled out a folder. Shell companies, offshore accounts, and a very interesting pattern of missing funds from the Whitmore estate's maintenance budget. Grace's breath caught. "The balcony railing that failed," Rachel continued, her voice low and urgent. "The one that nearly killed a 4-year-old boy. It was supposed to be replaced 2 years ago. Budget was approved, money was allocated, but the work was never done." "Because the money disappeared," Grace whispered. $240,000 in maintenance funds. Gone. Along with another $3 million from various estate accounts over 5 years. Rachel leaned forward. "Ms. Mitchell, I think Victoria Whitmore has been embezzling from her own household. And I think when that balcony failed and you saved Oliver, she didn't fire you because you were negligent. She fired you because you were a witness to her crime." Grace's mind raced backward. Victoria's paranoia about staff, her obsessive control over maintenance schedules, the way she'd hired and fired house managers every 6 months, never letting anyone see the full picture. Maria, the previous house manager, who'd been let go suddenly after asking about delayed repairs. "Oh my God," Grace breathed. "I need your help," Rachel said. "But I won't publish anything that puts Oliver at risk. His privacy is my first priority. This is about holding powerful people accountable, not hurting a child." Grace looked out the coffee shop window. Across the street, a news van idled, waiting to catch her leaving. She'd spent her whole life having her story told by other people, told wrong, told cruelly, twisted into something unrecognizable. "What do you need from me?" Grace asked. Grace had caught a falling child and saved his life. Now she was about to catch something else, a conspiracy that had nearly killed that child. The truth was about to explode in ways no one expected, and the billionaire father's next move would be the most unbelievable yet. The headline dropped like a bomb at 6 a.m. Whitmore embezzlement scandal. FBI arrests Victoria Whitmore and estate manager in multi-million-dollar fraud. Rachel Chen's exposé laid it all out. 5 years of theft. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Maintenance budgets drained while railings rotted and security systems failed. And at the center of it all, Victoria Whitmore and Maria Santos, the former estate manager, splitting millions while a mansion full of staff and one small boy lived in increasing danger. By noon, Victoria was in federal custody. Her assets frozen. Criminal charges filed. Grace found Jonathan in his office that evening. He sat in the dark, staring at nothing, a glass of whiskey untouched on his desk. "Jonathan?" He looked up, and Grace's heart broke. This powerful man who'd built empires and commanded boardrooms looked utterly shattered. "My son almost died," he whispered, "because I was too busy building my company to notice my wife was a criminal. Too distracted to see that the woman I married was stealing from us and letting our home fall apart around Oliver." Grace crossed the room and sat beside him. "Oliver is alive because you chose to do the right thing. You could have paid me off and buried this. Instead, you created a foundation to help people. You chose truth over convenience." "But I chose business over family for years before that." Jonathan's voice cracked. "What kind of father does that make me?" "The kind who's learning," Grace said gently. "The kind who's changing. Oliver sees that. He knows you're trying." Jonathan pressed his palms against his eyes. "How do I tell him? How do I explain that his mother—" "You tell him the truth. Age appropriately. You make sure he knows it's not his fault. That adults make their own choices, and their choices don't reflect on him." Grace had learned this the hard way with Jasmine after David died. "And you let him be angry and sad and confused. You don't fix it. You just stay beside him while he feels it." Jonathan looked at her. Really looked at her. "Will you help me? Not as my employee, as my friend?" Grace's throat tightened. "Of course." The media narrative shifted overnight. Grace Mitchell, the hero nanny who'd saved a child and exposed corruption. Jonathan Whitmore, the father fighting to protect his son and make amends. The story people wanted. Redemption and justice served. Donations to the Mitchell Foundation tripled. Applications for help flooded in. Grace hired more staff, helped more families, turned pain into purpose every single day. 6 months passed like a river finding new channels. Oliver started therapy, thrived in school, stopped asking when his mother was coming home. Jonathan sold the mansion, bought a brownstone in Brooklyn, 10 minutes from the foundation. Learned to cook pasta that only burned half the time. Grace's friendship with Jonathan deepened into something sturdy and real. They texted about grocery lists and Oliver's homework, had dinner together twice a week, laughed at terrible movies Oliver picked. Jasmine and Oliver became unlikely friends, a college-bound nursing student and a 5-year-old soccer enthusiast who thought she hung the moon. Now Grace stood in Central Park on a crisp Saturday morning, watching Oliver sprint across the field after a soccer ball. Jonathan cheered beside her, looking like any other dad in his jeans and team hoodie. "He's so happy," Jonathan said quietly. "So are you," Grace observed. Jonathan turned to her, something unreadable in his expression. Grace, can you come over for dinner tonight? Just the three of us. I need to. There's something I want to talk to you about. Her heart did a strange little flip. Of course. What time? 6. I'm making my famous semi-burnt spaghetti. Grace laughed. I'll bring the fire extinguisher. 6 months after the scandal broke, Grace stood in Central Park watching Oliver play soccer. Jonathan cheered beside her like any other dad. They'd survived the storm together. But the most unbelievable part of this story wasn't the foundation or the scandal or even the $1 million offer Grace had refused. It was what was about to happen in Jonathan's kitchen that evening, a moment of truth that would change everything one more time. The smoke alarm shrieked at exactly 6:15. Dad! Oliver yelled from the living room. The spaghetti's doing the thing again. Grace rushed into Jonathan's kitchen to find him waving a dish towel at the ceiling detector while a pot boiled over on the stove. She grabbed the pot, turned down the heat, and couldn't stop laughing. I followed the recipe exactly, Jonathan protested, looking adorably bewildered. The recipe says simmer, not volcanic eruption, Grace teased, opening windows. I'm here! Jasmine burst through the door, carrying garlic bread from the bakery down the street. Did we survive dinner? Barely, Oliver announced dramatically. He dragged Jasmine to the couch. Come on, I'm teaching you poker. Grace taught me, and I'm really good now. You're teaching her to bluff? Grace called out. It's a life skill, Oliver yelled back. An hour later, bellies full of salvaged spaghetti and store-bought garlic bread. Oliver fell asleep on the couch with his head in Jasmine's lap. She scrolled through her phone with one hand, absently running her fingers through his hair with the other. Grace stood at the kitchen sink, washing dishes, feeling something she'd almost forgotten: peace. Jonathan appeared beside her with a dish towel. They worked in comfortable silence until the last plate was clean. Grace. His voice was different, nervous. There's something I need to tell you. Her heart started hammering. Okay. I've fallen in love with you. The words tumbled out quick and raw. I know the timing might be wrong, and I know people will say things, and I know I come with complications and a 5-year-old and a criminal ex-wife, but, Jonathan. Grace set down the dish she was drying. Her hands trembled. I'm terrified. He went still. Of me? Of losing everything again. Of people saying I manipulated this. Of building something beautiful and watching it collapse. Grace's voice cracked. I've lost so much. I don't know if I can survive losing anything else. Jonathan took her hands gently. I'm scared too. Scared of messing this up. Scared I'm not worthy of your trust after everything my family put you through. Scared that I'll fail Oliver, fail you, fail at being the man you deserve. Grace looked up at him, seeing her own fear reflected back. Maybe, she whispered. Being scared together is better than being scared alone. Grace Mitchell. Jonathan's thumb brushed across her knuckles. I love you, and I will spend every day trying to deserve that love. You already do. The tears came then, but they were good tears, healing tears. I've fallen in love with you too. Jonathan cupped her face and kissed her, soft and reverent and full of promise. Finally! Jasmine's voice made them jump apart. She stood in the doorway, grinning. You two have been dancing around this for months. Even Oliver noticed, and he's 5. Grace laughed through her tears. How long have you been standing there? Long enough. Jasmine crossed the kitchen and hugged them both. I'm happy for you, Mom. You deserve this. A sleepy voice drifted from the couch. Love you, Grace. Grace's heart cracked open. Love you too, sweetheart. Later, in the elevator down to the street, Jasmine squeezed Grace's hand. We're really okay now, aren't we? Grace thought about the foundation, the families they'd helped, Jonathan and Oliver. This new, unexpected family they'd built from broken pieces. Yeah, baby, we're okay. Grace smiled. We're okay because when I was falling, I grabbed hold of myself and wouldn't let go. 2 years later. The Mitchell Foundation Gala glittered with Manhattan's elite. 1,000 families helped, $50 million distributed, lives rebuilt, one kitchen table at a time. Grace stood at the podium in a midnight blue gown, her wedding ring catching the light. We spend so much of our lives afraid of falling, she told the crowd. But what I've learned is that falling isn't the tragedy. The tragedy is when no one reaches out to catch us, or when we're too afraid to reach out ourselves. In the front row, Jonathan held Oliver's hand. Her husband. Her son, legally adopted 6 months ago when Oliver asked if Grace could be his real mom. The Mitchell Foundation exists because someone caught me when I was falling, and together, we decided to spend our lives catching others. The applause was thunderous. Backstage, Oliver crashed into her legs. Mom, you were amazing. Mom. The word still made her breath catch. Victoria was serving 8 years in federal prison. Jonathan's divorce had been swift and final. Life was messy and complicated, and sometimes Oliver had nightmares, and sometimes the foundation faced challenges that kept Grace up at night. But it was also beautiful, hard-won, real. Grace Mitchell grabbed a falling child and discovered she could hold more than she ever imagined. The unbelievable thing the billionaire father did wasn't just offering money or creating a foundation. It was recognizing her worth when she'd almost forgotten it herself, and giving her the platform to help hundreds of others find their worth too. True wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the courage to act with compassion and the wisdom to recognize and elevate that compassion in others. And Grace Mitchell's strength, hard-won, tested by fire, and unshakable, was the most valuable currency of all. Thanks so much for watching Grace's incredible journey from that terrifying moment on the balcony to building an empire of kindness. This story shows us that sometimes our darkest moments can lead us to our greatest purpose. Grace didn't just save Oliver's life that day, she saved her own too. If this story inspired you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share it with someone who needs to hear that falling doesn't mean failing, and that courage can change everything. What part of Grace's story resonated with you the most? Drop a comment below. I love hearing your thoughts. Remember, true wealth isn't what you have, it's what you give, and who you become in the process. Thanks for being here. I'll see you in the next story.